The film begins with a large party hosted by the most powerful and recognized Yakuza family in Osaka, Japan. At the party, the Yakuza family introduces their toddler-aged daughter to the guests. Unfortunately, in the middle of this joyous occasion, someone unexpectedly attacks and begins shooting everyone at the party. The Yakuza family is massacred. Even as the Yakuza leader's kid attempts to reach his motionless mother, the killer shoots him immediately. 20 years later in Sao Paulo, Brazil, a guy wakes up in a hospital with no memory of what happened. When he tries to leave his room, he is blocked by many people who refuse to let him go. The man, who does not have a name, is left wondering how he got up in the hospital with several cuts on his body. In another district of Sao Paulo, where many Japanese descendants live, a girl named Amy practices sword fighting with her master Chiba. Amy has no parents and has lived exclusively with her grandfather since she was a child. Amy's grandfather died recently, so she was handed to Chiba, who works hard to train her. When Amy wants to give up, Chiba reminds her that her grandfather wanted her to be strong and unbreakable. Meanwhile in Japan, a Yakuza member named Takashi receives a phone call from his subordinates after spending time with a woman. After hanging up the phone, he hurries to a location where a man named Yoshiaki, who is believed to have betrayed him, is tortured. Before dying, Yoshiaki informs Takashi that his boss is aware of the information Takashi has been hiding. Yoshiaki's employer even dispatched an assassin to eliminate the person Takashi is concealing. When Takashi hears this, he becomes enraged and murders everyone present. Returning of Amy, who has just completed training at Chiba's dojo, she rushes into the shop where she works. Not long after, Amy's buddy arrives to discuss her romantic troubles and advises her to find a boyfriend. Amy says she doesn't have time to think about it because she is still grieving over her grandfather's death. When Amy gets home, she prays for her late grandfather and recalls several memories of him. At the hospital, the man with amnesia awakens with his hands shackled until a doctor and a team of police investigators arrive to hand him the katana he was holding when he was discovered asleep. The amnesiac man claims he does not recall anything, including the katana. The doctor and police team then leave. The amnesiac man surreptitiously removes his restraints, enters the bathroom, and emerges in changed clothes. After looking around, he purposely activates the fire alarm, causing pandemonium in the hospital, which he utilizes to steal the katana from his room before fleeing the premises. Takashi arrives at the large Yakuza boss's offices at the same time as his opponent, Kojiro. Kojiro complains to the manager about Takashi murdering Yoshiaki. Kojiro uses this to persuade his supervisor that Takashi is becoming untrustworthy. Takashi offers to cut off his finger to prove his loyalty, but the boss refuses, demonstrating his continued trust in Takashi. Kojiro cautions Takashi to be cautious if he does not want to lose his life. Meanwhile, in Sao Paulo, the amnesiac man wanders the city without knowing where to go. The next day, Amy visits a tattoo shop to acquire a tattoo of a symbol her grandfather has always shown her. Even though she doesn't understand what the symbol represents, she picks it to honor her grandfather, who was assassinated by a mysterious figure wielding a katana. In another area of the city, the amnesiac guy examines the katana he is holding, seeking to recall something about what happened to him. He also takes the bandage off his face, displaying cuts from sharp objects. A few days later, Amy celebrates her birthday, and a friend invites her to a nightclub party. Anma enjoys the celebration and chooses to take the stage to perform her favorite song. Unfortunately, a rude man disturbs and teases her, so she fights back. At the time, his buddies attempted to defend him, but the fight was interrupted by nightclub security. On the other side, the amnesiac man was going down the street when he was lured into an antique shop by the katana he was clutching. There he discovered the katana sheath. Soon, the shop owner, an elderly guy, emerged and announced that the shop was closing. The amnesiac man ignored him and rudely inquired about the katana. The shopkeeper explained that the katana was left there to be sharpened. Muramasa, the katana, was cursed, forcing its possessor to always seek for victims. Soon after, the shopkeeper offered the amnesiac man the address of the katana's original owner, so he might obtain additional information. Meanwhile, Amy was at home, unwrapping a drink that her grandfather had reserved for her birthday. She felt depressed and unmotivated, especially because she lived alone. The next morning, the amnesiac man went to the address provided by the shop owner and rode the elevator to Amy's flat. When he arrived, Amy was not present, so he began checking each room for clues. Unfortunately, he was unable to locate any solutions to his missing memories. Takashi arrived at the airport and noticed Paulo, signaling for the driver to take him somewhere. Meanwhile, Amy is being pursued by the men she beat up in the nightclub. She goes to her apartment to hide, but they break in and attempt to attack her. The amnesiac man, who remains in the apartment, assists Amy in fighting them off. The delinquents have weapons, so Amy takes the Muramasa katana and slashes one of them. Takashi soon comes and Amy and the amnesiac guy misidentify him as one of the delinquents. At that point, they attempt to flee to the roof. Then Takashi pursues and fires at them. The amnesiac man fights back, knocking Takashi's gun away. With Ami's assistance, they throw Takashi into a moving elevator to escape. To escape being apprehended by Takashi, Amy takes the amnesiac man to Chuba's dojo. There, Amy assists in cleaning the man's wounds. Even though they don't know each other, they sense a connection through the Muramasa katana, which they believe will help them discover the truth about their past. Later, when searching for medicine in the dojo, Amy discovers a photograph of her family with Takashi. She questions Shiba, who has just arrived, about it. Shiba says Amy should talk to the owner of the shop where she works to acquire answers. He also informs her that her survival depends on the Muramasa. Amy chooses to go immediately to learn more about Takashi's relationship with her family. Meanwhile, the amnesiac man, understanding he has been left behind, surreptitiously pursues Amy. Arriving in front of the shop, Amy meets the owner, Mrs. Shibahara, who claims to have spoken with Amy's grandfather before he died. Shibahara provides Amy a Japanese address. After seeing Shibahara, Amy continues on her trek to the address her grandfather left. Meanwhile, police are investigating and gathering evidence at Amy's flat following the alleged commotion. After arriving in Sao Paulo, Kojiro and his men attack the police at Amy's apartment. It turns out that Kojiro and his crew are after Amy. On the train, Amy, who had fallen asleep, awakens to see the amnesiac man alongside her. He explains that he has no other way to regain his memory than to follow Amy, who is likewise tied to the Muramasa. Hearing this, Amy ultimately agrees to let the amnesiac man accompany her. When Amy and the amnesiac guy arrive in an old village, they are confronted by two elderly men who attempt to chase them away. Shortly later, Amy shows them her Muramasa sword, and the two men dressed in traditional Japanese attire allow her to enter. At the time, the amnesiac man was only allowed to wait in a room with the two elderly men, who showed him their Yakuza tattoos. Soon later, Amy meets an elderly woman dressed in a kimono, who introduces her to the local Yakuza chief. The Yakuza commander advises Amy that in the Yakuza world, friends and foes can change quickly, so she must be prepared to travel large distances to fight for something. At the time, Amy didn't fully grasp what he was saying, but she listened attentively. Then she was instructed to clean up and rest while waiting for someone to meet her. That night, the amnesiac man, who was still waiting for Amy, drank too much wine and passed out. Soon after, the two elderly guys hauled him to a warehouse and abandoned him there. Later that night, after the rain had ceased, the elderly woman led Amy to a local cemetery. She allowed Amy to uncover answers about her past. After going around, Amy discovered her grandfather's grave, which had a storage box. Using the light from a traditional Japanese lantern, Amy opened the box and discovered a newspaper clip. The clipping indicated that Amy was the daughter of the largest Yakuza organization, which had been slaughtered by their opponents. Meanwhile, at the warehouse, the amnesiac guy awakens to discover that he has been trapped in the cemetery's storage room. Amy lifts her katana when she sees Takashi, who had previously pursued her. Takashi quietly approaches her and assures her that he will not assault. When a group of individuals arrives at the cemetery, Takashi instructs Amy to hide. Unexpectedly, Kojiro and his men raid the settlement and capture the Yakuza leader. Meanwhile, the amnesiac man emerges from the warehouse and is astonished to see everyone dead at the graveyard. Takashi and Amy silently eliminate numerous adversaries, but there are too many, so Takashi fires his gun, resulting in a shootout. While battling, he encourages Amy to escape. In the yard next to the home, Kojiro courses the village's Yakuza head into revealing the whereabouts of Amy and Takashi. When the leader refuses, Kojiro becomes enraged and beheads him. Meanwhile, while Takashi and Amy were ready to depart in Takashi's car, Kojiro's men opened fire, forcing them to cover once more. Fortunately, the amnesiac man arrived and fought Kojiro's men, allowing Takashi to capture Amy and flee, leaving the amnesiac man to fight. Takashi escorted Amy to a safe location and told her about her survival in Sao Paulo after the slaughter. Takashi had to pretend to be loyal to the murderer of Amy's family, who is now the top Yakuza boss in Osaka. When the big boss discovered that Amy had survived, he dispatched an assassin to assassinate her grandfather. Strangely, this assassin has lost his memory and is now assisting Amy. After concluding the story, Takashi informed Amy that she needed to return to Japan to resurrect her family clan and face the huge boss. Takashi discovered Amy had discreetly departed while he was explaining something. Soon later, Amy decided to visit the dojo to meet Cheba, but she discovered her martial arts master dead in a pool of blood. Soon after, the amnesiac man came to the dojo. Amy attacked him, believing he had slain Cheba. The amnesiac man tried to flee and implored Amy to calm down and listen, but she continued to attack until Takashi arrived and attempted to kill him. Amy stopped Takashi, stating that she had forgiven the amnesiac guy. Amy and Takashi then dashed to the helicopter pad on the roof of a nightclub building to reach the airport. At the nightclub, a man led them through numerous rooms where the Yakuza conducted their illegal business. They weren't aware that assassins were waiting for them. Amy and Takashi had to fight the assassins. After overcoming their opponents, Amy used her remaining power to help the injured Takashi to the rooftop. Kojiro and his crew were holding the amnesiac man as a captive. Kojiro then attacked Takashi with his katana, killing him. Takashi pledged in his final moments to remain loyal to Amy's family. At the moment, Amy was in a difficult situation because she had to fight Kojiro and his troops alone. Fortunately, the amnesiac man fought back, defeating Kojiro's soldiers. Amy quickly drew out her katana, and Kojiro followed suit, sparking a sword fight. Despite being injured, Amy continued to battle until she immobilized Kojiro. To conclude the combat, she cut Kojiro with her katana. At the conclusion of the fight, Amy approaches the amnesiac guy with the Muramasa sword aimed at him. The amnesiac man said he did not kill Chiba, so Amy believed him and gave him the name Shuru. When the helicopter arrived, Amy urged Shuru to accompany her to Japan to confront the powerful boss who had massacred her family 20 years before. The movie concludes, "This film's moral lesson is to never underestimate the strength of a good katana and to always keep an amnesiac companion around, for they could just save the day. And remember, if things become tough, just call for a helicopter rescue."